Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. And today I'm here with Laura McKowen, and this is just the best. I mean, Laura, we have not talked face to face in probably 2 years, more than 2 years.
Yeah, it was when you had just published This Naked Mind, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because we had you on Home.
Yep.
And we had just started Home. You were like one of our first few guests, so it's been a while. But I feel like I see you, or I see your stuff all the time.
Yeah, same.
And I talk face to face.
I read your stuff all the time. I mean, I don't know, Laura, just so everybody knows, if you don't know Laura, she is probably one of the most talented writers. Hands down, has a way to craft words that just reach the deepest parts of you. And it's really beautiful. And your writing just since the beginning has been incredible for me personally, but just also something that I just so readily share with just about everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That means a lot.
So, like I love to do, why don't we just back way up for you? I'm sure you've repeated it a million times, but
no, I haven't actually talked about my story in a long time, so I'm happy to do that. It's no, I haven't.
So
you just need to
dive in, yeah.
Okay. How do I usually do this? I know it's So, my story, my drinking story. Yeah, I started drinking. I grew up in a drinking family where drinking was just the thing that it wasn't always overdone, but it was just done all the time. Alcohol was just always kind of there and around and flowing. And I thought that's just what adults did. And a lot, I didn't even realize that my family was more of a drinking family than others until I got married. And my husband was like, wow, your family drinks a lot. And I didn't really know. I thought that's just because I think you drinkers hang out with drinkers, right? And so everyone that came over was just drinking. It was the first thing you do when someone walks in the house is, do you want to drink?
Yeah, no matter what time of day. It's just
no matter what time, no matter what day it is. And my ex-husband now, he was like, your family drinks a lot. And I would go to his family's things and they would have some stuff there, but it was everyone, it was not the main attraction,
Right.
So I started when I was 16, I drank a little bit in high school. It wasn't anything crazy. But I do remember a really pivotal point in my drinking when I graduated early. It's at 17, not advanced or anything. It was just, I was an August baby. So I had a graduation party and at my family's restaurant, we owned a restaurant, which was a lot of, the drinking seeds were planted there too. And I had a really bad eating disorder at that time. I was tiny and constantly thinking about my body, constantly thinking about trying to just get some semblance of control in my life. But alcohol was the one time that I could I was afraid of it, but I liked doing it because it let me when, if you've experienced an eating disorder, it kind of numbs you out and I couldn't feel anything anymore. It was all I was doing was sort of surviving in the world, basic survival instincts or basic survival needs and trying to deny them. And then, so feelings were secondary. And I drank so that I could feel a little bit. And also, so it also numbed, it was a weird thing. But I would always regret doing it because it would lessen the control on my eating. And I would always eat binge of some kind. And then I would have that whole loop of just regret, but it allowed me to forget what I was doing, forget myself enough to do it. So anyway, I was really tiny at that time. I can remember the exact outfit I had on that day. And I was drinking Bacardi Limon and Diet Coke. Ew. And so gross. And I was just, at that point I could drink openly with my family. And I was going back to the bar to refill. It was probably my third one, big tumbler full.
This was at 16.
17. Yeah, and I'm way like nothing. So I was really buzzed. Um, and was filling it up, like filling up the drink. And I remember thinking, like, if I can just stay like this, I'll be okay. If I can just stay like this feeling, I could be okay, because all my insecurities went away. Always had like, I was always really awkward with boys, and I really wanted them to like me, but I didn't know how to like do that. I was more uncomfortable with sexuality. Like I was kind of a late bloomer. And so it allowed me, like, it was like the way into all those things, you know? And I remember that moment it was scary. Like I knew there was something really scary about that thought. Like if I could just stay this way, because what did that, you know, like I'm just going to be drunk for the rest of my life. But I really thought like, that's my key to be.
That was the answer.
That is the answer for me to be in the world, and it will allow me to do everything I want to do. And it seemed like when I drank, everything was possible, right? Everything was possible. And it's sort of just continued that way. Like I continue to feel that way about drinking. And I've never really put this together exactly like this before, but it was like in college, then I gained a bunch of weight, and it allowed me to like forget how self-conscious I was about that. And it was when I was drunk was really the only time that I was okay in my body. And it allowed me, I mean, it made it okay for me to have sex for the first time. It made it okay for me to like, it just seemed like the fixer for everything, you know? And I can say for me, I drank problematically from the beginning. Like I knew in college, I started to get the sense that I really liked it a lot more than other people. And that I just didn't have this like off switch. I just there was never enough. And like that whole thing about it being the sort of opening to everything. I remember the first night I moved to Boston after college with one of my best friends. And the first night we were here, we went out, and that was like, I knew that I just wanted to get to a bar and start drinking. Like that was my way into like meet people and be in the city. And it just felt like I didn't know how to do that otherwise. I didn't like, that was the way I knew in.
Right.
And we blacked out that night, or I did. And we invited these guys over to our house. And like, there's so much about that night I don't remember. And like two girls that are 21 in this new city, and it could have been so dangerous, you know, but, and again, I remember that feeling like anytime I would start a job, was always like, okay, when are we going out drinking together? Because then I will get to like really know you, and then I will feel comfortable here, you know? It was like that constant, that's what I needed to, I just thought that was the way in. And I hung out with people who drank a lot. And so we were all in the same like agreement, you know, this is what you do. Right. And this is what it means to be an adult. And this is this is like the good way to live, and kind of the crazier, the better. I mean, I drank a lot in college, but my 20s was like, whoa, like way more. And I was so excited to learn that that's what people did in their 20s. Like when they had jobs, it didn't slow down. It just was like, we just also had responsibilities on top of our, you know, very excessive drinking. So just to speed it up a little bit, you know, I was always the girl that like had to be taken care of, you know, like my friends would be annoyed because they had to take care of me somehow. And it was like this joke that wasn't really a joke, you know, like I knew that I was a bit embarrassed of it and ashamed of it. But I didn't know how to not just get wasted. Like I had no interest in just social drinking. I wanted to go for like the blackout or the pass out or the whatever. I mean, I wasn't trying to do those things, but that's what happened every time. And it got a little bit better when I met the guy that I was going to marry, because I was distracted enough and I was motivated enough to not fuck it up.
Right.
So I slowed down. And also he was kind of, and I was in love, it's like I was getting the dopamine somewhere else.
Right.
For a while. And then it really changed when I had my daughter. It just became something very different. I think that's what a lot of women experience. I mean, you have to hold up so much more. You're exhausted. I just think of that as the time when my drinking really stopped working. Like,
me too.
I remember distinctly that feeling of like, this is making things so much worse. Or I don't get that relief anymore. It's not that I knew it was making it worse. It's just like, my relief window was like 30 minutes,
Right.
And then I started to feel wretched anxiety, which I already had. It just like poured gasoline on it. Couldn't sleep. It just started to catch up. All the things that drinking does started to really catch up with me as a mom. And I really was struggling in my marriage. Like, I didn't really think I wanted to be married. And I started drinking kind of at that. And I really started to compartmentalize my life. Like, I started drinking behind his back. I would go to happy hour after work, and I'd end up spending 3 hours there before I came home. And then we, would have wine when I got home. And I was lying a lot about, I just started lying a lot. I mean, I can look back at that, and it was like, I just started to like retreat sort of in. There was like this inner life that was going on, and then this outer life. And it looked very different to other people, to individual people. Like, I had my work people, and we all kind of were crazy together. And then I had my home life, and then I had like my friends. And I remember getting this distinct feeling like nobody really knows what's going on with me. And I couldn't really look at it, but I still never thought that drinking was the thing,
Right.
like I thought, and we had a really rough start to our marriage. We had a lot of just shit happen in our lives. And, it was 2010 when my daughter was born in 2009. And like the year after that was a, horrific financial crisis. And we were both unemployed at like the same time. At one point, we moved across the country twice. Things were really, really hard. And I mean, I would make the decision. I remember like looking at our bank account, and I would see we have, $110 between two adults, with like our phones blowing up, time for, bill collection. And I would think, should I buy, like, how am I going to buy wine? Because that's the thing that needs to happen. It was like a non-negotiable for me. And there are infinitely, it just supplanted all the other sort of needs. So it got really different when I had my daughter too. And it escalated pretty quickly for me. I couldn't wait to not be pregnant anymore so I could start drinking again. Like, I remember that period of time, the pregnant was deeply uncomfortable. And I didn't really put it together. Like, I did, but I didn't. I knew I hated not being able to drink wine. And there were a few moments when it really hit me hard how uncomfortable I was, but I didn't really totally put it together because I knew when it was over, I'd drink, and I was just going to jump off that cliff again. Wait. I mean, and I did not wait. And then, fast forward a few years and my marriage fell apart. It didn't fall apart because of my drinking. Like, that wasn't the only thing, but it was absolutely 100% a contributing factor, because I was dishonest. I was not present. I had no idea how to tell the truth. I just drank, and drinking was more important to me. Like, I wanted him to get the fuck out of my way, because he was starting to, like, at that point, he was never said, you're an alcoholic, or you, like, this is something that you have to stop forever. But he was like, you have to slow down. And he always saw it as like a self-medication thing, because he knew all like stuff I was going through too. And he's like, don't drink when you're upset. Don't, so he also doesn't know this world of like what it looks like. He was just sort of watching me just spiral in a lot of ways. And he was one of the first people that said, like, you need to not fucking drink, like maybe for a while, and like, fuck you, like,
right.
That's not going. And I would try sometimes to like rein it in, and or I would take like certain measures to just not fall off completely, but it was never ever in my mind to just stop. Like that wasn't going to happen. But we separated, and when we separated, it was like, okay, nobody's watching me anymore. I can drink however I want, and I'm single again, like hallelujah. And it was just the biggest shit show ever. I mean, it was scary because when I didn't have my daughter, I just wouldn't come home, for nights at a time. I would stay like with coworkers. I would stay with people I don't know. I had a dog. I would like come home just to take her out and then leave again. It was so sloppy and so messy and so scary. And that within a year, I got a DUI. I had like the horrific sort of bottom incident with my daughter where I left her in a hotel room overnight and at a wedding. And that was when because my family was there, that was when I really was forced to stop. And I had to consider that maybe I need to get sober or maybe I need to address this, But those were just like, those two things were just two of thousands of things that should have maybe clued me into the fact that this wasn't working. And, I always say too, like, it's important, I think, to hear, my life was like, I looked pretty good. I was like killing it at work. I worked in advertising and marketing, and I kept getting promotions, and I was really good at playing the part. I had a lot of friends, although those friendships were starting to decay a little bit in the last years. I had a beautiful daughter, lived in a pretty home, but everything was a mess. And then I started to go to AA meetings because I didn't know what else to do. And at that point, I had to start telling people, that I was trying to do this because first of all, like I knew that I would lose custody of my daughter eventually. Like I knew that would happen. And I had to tell my ex-husband what had happened with her. She actually told him right after I did. So I'm glad I did. She was 4 and she was like, this is what happened, So people were watching me. But it took me a full year plus to actually get sober. Because I think I was so addicted at that point that it was physically very hard for me to stop. Emotionally, it was devastating to end. Like, I don't know that we talk about it as much as we should, but like the grief of your life, your drinking life ending was so massive for me. I just couldn't fathom it. And I was so sad. And I had just gotten divorced, and I was like, there was that. And then it was like everything came to a screeching halt. And so I kept certain parts of my drinking life alive. There were certain people I knew exactly who knew that I was trying to stop and exactly who didn't know, and I traveled a lot. And like when I would travel, I would drink. But in that year and a half, I spent most of those days sober. I would go for like, a couple weeks. I would go to meetings and I would try to pull it together. And sometimes I would even feel great, like I'm going to do this. And then I just would find myself drinking. Like I couldn't even explain it. And I also never really, like, I thought that there would be a time when I'd actually want to stop, like fully, no ambivalence, nothing. I would just want to stop. And AA was also really the only thing I knew, like I think we're probably getting sober at the same time I was.
We did, yes.
Yeah. We were both in the struggle.
Yep.
And about the summer after the DUI and all that, I created an Instagram account, and I started to post a new account. I had like my personal account, but I created a new account called Clear Eyes Full Heart. And I started to post little things about what I was going through. And it was like this first little outlet for me to start telling the truth about what was going on. And I've always wanted to write, always. And I started writing too. Like I had a blog that was just sitting out there kind of collecting dust. It's really hard to write about your life when you can't be honest about your life.
Yeah.
My posts from before then were so ridiculous. It was like I was trying to allude to certain things, but I couldn't really say anything. It's like, God, that's so painful to read. It's like nonsense. But I started writing, and meeting people. I met a lot of people really through Instagram that were going through the same thing. And I finally, in September of 2014, had my last day one. And it was just like a very sad sort of resignation, because there was nothing left for me in drinking. Like there was no even 30 seconds of relief. I knew too much, So it just, and I didn't know that it was going to be the end of it for me. I just didn't know. I couldn't think, I realized I couldn't think like that anymore. I couldn't think like forever, because it sounded awful. So I just would say, okay, just today you're not going to, that's it. Like period, today, just make it to like 8:00 and make it home and eat. And if you can do that, chances are you're not going to drink. And then I kept doing that, and shortly after that, I started writing a lot more, started home podcasts. And then it was like, I sort of came out to the world as being sober, and like, there was no way I was turning around,
Right.
And it's not just because of that I didn't turn around, but that was a big piece of it. And things just got a lot fucking better.
Yeah.
Like a lot better. And then they get harder in different ways.
Yes. So true.
But that's the sort of, and my AA thing is like, I really leaned heavily on AA in the beginning, and then I sort of drifted away from it for a while. And then I came back to it, in the past 6 months. And so that's been really interesting too, because I see how beautiful it is in some ways. And my time not participating in that was so important for me too. Yeah. And somehow I've like created an entire world around talking about this stuff. Don't you think that's weird sometimes?
Yeah. Super weird.
You're like, how did I become this girl? That is like, it's so surprising, but it's also not, because it's like, I've always been very interested in like a spiritual path and growing, and like growth and transformation and pain. Like I've always been very interested in talking about these things. And I never thought I'd be talking about it in this way. In the lens of addiction and recovery. I didn't know that would be the thing that would get me there.
Yeah. I feel exactly the same way. It's sort of like if somebody would have told me, 4 years ago or whatever, 5 years ago, that like this was going to happen, I would have been like, call bullshit. Like, no way. That is not like, I was the biggest alcohol proponent. And I was just convinced that I loved it so much that there was no inkling. And I think you're right. Like in terms of a spiritual path, it's like, how can I not see this as anything else? Because every single moment of this journey, it's kind of felt like stepping off a cliff. Like, okay, so wait, you want me to do what? Put out my journals? Like, okay, so you want me to like come out with this? And then just hoping that like the ground's going to be there.
That's such a good way of putting it. It's so true. And you have to continue to be willing to like step off the cliff, because the times that I've stopped growing or stopped being willing to grow, really, I've got hit with a lot of pain. Like it doesn't feel good.
One of the things that, you know, was really profound for me based on like something I feel like you taught me a lot, was during our first conversation. Where I had come from is I had no knowledge of AA whatsoever. All I knew about AA was my brother's experience in prison that he had told me about. And so, you know, I published the book, and you had a lot of questions, rightly so, because I had really, like, you know, just given it from like, okay, so now then I went and I didn't know anything. I went and read the big book. I found kind of these scientific fallacies that I was like, okay, this doesn't make sense. And like, here I am. And so what had happened is that based on that, you know, people had gotten my book, the early download version that was just really messy before I put it out, like actually self-published it. And so I started getting like hate mail, and it was intense. And I started getting people to tell me to like stop what I was doing, and that I was going to kill people, and I was going to like let them like off the hook of going to meetings. And like, so I was so blindsided, because really my first introduction to something that, you know, I now consider to be extremely beautiful, and I actually refer people to often, depending on kind of where they are and where, like, what they need, but was so negative. And you and I had such a real conversation about it, where you just really explained to me that you just gave me a different perspective on everything about what it is. And I think that it's so much more than like these tenets that were built in the 30s. Like, those are obviously the framework, but the human beings in the room with the intention. And then I did go to a women's meeting in Denver. Yeah. And oh my gosh, like every single woman in that room came up and gave me her phone number, like her personal phone number, any time of day or night. Like the amount of like love and support and like people in your corner to help you out was phenomenal. And anyway, just thank you for that, because I think that I had such a, initially, like, people were lashing out at me and I immediately got defensive and like, oh, well, geez, you know, then.
Yeah. Like, what's your problem? I remember that conversation so well. And I think it was just that you didn't understand why not, I think it was around the label alcoholic, like why you, like, saying that something about, like, you didn't understand why that's fearful for people to not.
People were really upset with me that I said that you wouldn't have to call yourself an alcoholic. And that was one of the main points of contention. Was that if I was saying that, then I was going to be harming people, because if people weren't willing to admit that about themselves, then they wouldn't be willing to get help. And so I was just getting a lot of, and I was like, well, wait a second, it's like not actually in the medical manuals anymore. Like, I come at this very analytically, you know, very intellectually, sometimes to a fault, certainly. And you just, like, I mean, maybe you can explain.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was just that it's terrifying to people to have that idea taken away from them, because there's this idea, and I don't really love it, and I don't call myself an alcoholic, that if you forget that, you're going to end up drinking again and probably die, or, you know, worse, live and have this horrible existence. I mean, I think the thing that's so beautiful about your work is you really started to have people look at problem drinking as a much wider spectrum than those who would qualify as an alcoholic, by taking the quiz, you know, and that is incredibly, incredibly important. And I think there is a certain persona. I think addiction is a spectrum. I mean, it's not, I don't think that. We know it is. There's like dependence, and then there's like acute addiction, and they look very different and they feel very different, and spiritually and emotionally and mentally and physically and physiologically, they're very different. And I think there's a certain persona that identifies with an AA meeting. And there's a, like, the gray area drinking, where maybe your life isn't fucking blowing up and maybe even your insides aren't that terrible, but you know that this isn't good. That person is going to go to a meeting probably and be like, this doesn't feel right, because there's a lot of like, there's a deathly seriousness to AA meetings. You know what I mean? In a good way. And I think that meets people in a certain place, but it doesn't meet everybody.
I think what you said that was so good, that gave me so much perspective. Like in addition to everything you just said, was really when you're coming at, so my drinking was certainly like spiritually and emotionally like devastating for me. But the things that like I would consider like my worst points were things that like, yeah, they hurt me and they motivated me to change, but they also, you know, weren't like the worst of the, I don't know, whatever. I can't even put this into good words, but the thing that you gave me perspective on, and it was you, and it was actually an episode of television, it was a silly show about the president with Kevin Spacey, whatever that was, like, anyway.
Oh my God, House of Cards.
House of Cards, thank you. So there was one where he, the assistant, he goes on a bender, and it's like a 4-day bender, and he like throws up and starts drinking, and then throws up and starts drinking. And it was you and then one of my dad's really close friends who I didn't even know was sober. And he came and he read my book, and he sat me down, and he's like, let me tell you how my drinking was. And he told me the same story of he would be sick, but then physically be unable to stop himself from drinking more, and he would be sick. He's like, that type of prison, that type of lock and chain, that type of addiction is so terrifying that for me to identify as an alcoholic is freedom, because that means that I know I can never have another drink. And I know with certainty that I can never have another drink. And I think also that also allows for the grieving. Like so much of my work, and I try to be so careful about kind of who comes into my world, because I'm like, look, I even give people like the DSM, like if you're on the spectrum like this, like you probably need AA, you probably need something besides like a book, or, you know, you need some more stuff. But that type of, like I just can't even physically imagine the pain of that.
Yeah, it is really a matter of life or death. I think that's what the difference is, you know. I think it's a matter, like if I was at that point, like I should have died, I could have died, I was very close to dying. And so, and to some people, calling yourself an alcoholic is like this final admission, like, oh my God, okay, I am, and that means freedom, and it means I never have to drink again. It doesn't feel that way to me, which is why I don't say it. But I mean, I could talk about this stuff for hours, because I'm still like understanding, you know, I also think AA is a very masculine program, and that doesn't appeal to a lot of women. The language can be difficult. But the program itself, the 12 steps, I should say, themselves are beautiful, ancient spiritual wisdom, as my sponsor says. They're profound, but it's a program of people. And so the fellowship, it gets, you know, twisted like religions do, and it gets warped and modified, and there can be this element of fear that overrides things, which isn't what the program was designed to be. But that's just humans, like, you know. So experiences vary greatly. Yeah.
I see that happening with my book. Like it's one little book, right? And I see people taking it, and then in these communities that now have grown to thousands of people, like twisting something and then yelling at somebody about like, oh, well, you're counting days. Well, Annie Grace says you shouldn't count days. Well, that's not true. Like, that's not the spirit of what I was talking about. Like, that has nothing to do with anything. Like, we're not here to judge each other. Come on.
I know. But that's just what humans do, and it's okay, and it's part of the deal. But I think if we looked at, it's almost like if you looked at all the religions in their essence and their core, they are all basically the same, you know. And AA is it's spiritual wisdom too, you know. It's like, take care of your house, don't lie, say you're sorry when you have hurt someone.
Yeah,
you know,
and service is like really at the core, and that is truly, you know, when you take everything else away, and if you get down to the things that you know are true for all human beings, if we can put ourselves in a position of service, like we will find freedom and happiness. Like there's just no doubt.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's also, you know, I think probably your program too, and A is really good because it's like CBT. It's like you learn to a different way of being by doing very basic things, going to meetings, talking in a certain way, using a certain lexicon. It like actually changes your brain.
Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome. One of the things you said, I'm keeping you on a long time. I have a few more things though, but one of the things you said that I thought was just like really struck me is when you were talking about how you were the drinker that needed to be taken care of. Like how I see you now, Laura, in the world is, oh man, you are taking care. Like, I mean, it makes me, it's so beautiful to watch you because like you were just like putting your arms around women and people and with such true authenticity and heart. And like, I just like, you said that and I could just see this path of like every person that took care of you was preparing you to take care of all of these people.
Yeah.
I just think it's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just like, it's so true. And I don't think about it as often as I should. Like that. Yeah.
There's something about you that's just very welcoming. Like anyone can come, anyone can hear, anyone can like learn and sit with you. And you feel like you have space for the whole world. Like your presence is really just beautiful. I mean, I can feel it over Skype, having never met you and in person and just watching you. And I just really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And I think it's just awesome. I have 2 more questions for you. First of all, we'll go to a really simple one and then we'll go to the emotional one.
Okay.
The simple one is, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about all the amazing thing you're doing?
Everything's on my website. It's lauramckowen.com, and everything is from there. You can find my Instagram. Instagram's my favorite. That's kind of where all of my, I'm not writing a ton on my blog lately because of my book, but that's where a lot of my thoughts go and my just daily experience. Facebook too, but everything's there. All my courses, all my blog posts, obviously, events, workshops, everything.
That's awesome. All right. So then final question, like if you could go back to the Laura of the drinking days and, you know, the Laura that was leaving her daughter, and what would you tell her about what life is like now? The Laura that was afraid.
Oh, you're so right. This was much more emotional. Oh God. I was just so scared all the time, you know. I would tell her to do the hard thing, you know, and that she'll be caught. Like, there's this beautiful quote, and I'll have to send to you who the person is that said it, because I hate not quoting someone correctly, but it's a strange name. But he says, let me fall if I might fall, the one I will become will catch me. And I would have her read that over and over again, you know, that you'll become somebody new every day, and that person will be able to catch the you from yesterday. I had so little faith that I could be good again, that anything, you know, I kind of have this optimism for life, and I had really lost it. Like I thought I had broken things beyond repair, myself, everything. And I really needed to know that I hadn't, and I was exactly as broken as I needed to be. So yeah, I would also just tell her that she's still like a very beautiful person. I lost all of that too. I thought that I was just like, who does that? You know, who does the things that I had done? So I would tell her that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, it's hard to answer those things because I just don't live there anymore. And I know that you probably feel the same way. I have to try to feel that again, and to really remember when I thought, and I thought for so long that it would just always be right here in my face. And it's not. I don't live there anymore. I really don't.
It's such a beautiful thing. One of the things that I really love about all of your work is that you do give people permission to grieve the part of ourselves that was that other person. You know, I think that so often, especially like in my work, I try so hard to focus on like what's positive, what you're looking forward to, and that works to an extent. But like when you're talking about alcohol being like your way in and the thing that connected you with other humans, like that feeling deserves grief, you know, because you have to relearn those things. And when you said too that, you know, September, I think of 2014, that it was a sad resignation rather than a like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like that isn't everybody's experience, but to know that that's okay if it is your experience, like that's totally cool. And like just giving people permission to feel that, because no matter how destructive and negative alcohol is and how happy we are to be free of it now, in the moment, you don't believe those things. And sometimes you have to make the choice to let go of it before you know
Often
that it's true.
I'm so glad you said that. I'll say one more thing, because I think that the way it can look like, if you're on Instagram and you're exploring, you know, sober hashtags and stuff like that, it can look like everyone is so fucking happy and excited to be sober. And I've had people actually write me that before. Like, I feel like I'm missing something. You know, I was so deep in grief and hate and anger, and I didn't want it even up until like a year and a half of being sober. I was still very ambivalent. Like I knew it was the better thing, but there were times when I didn't want it, you know? So I think not skipping past that part is really important for a lot of people. I think some people go into it. I mean, I would go into meetings and hear people talk and we like never looked back, you know, they came in, never looked back. And it was like so far away from my experience. That's just not how it went for me.
I think it's just important to like honor and know that like that experience is totally legitimate and that might be where you are. And then that's okay. Like that's more than okay. Right.
Yeah. And the minute you just say, this is where I am, it's very.
Yeah. It's so cool. Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's just been incredible.
I know. You're awesome.
You too.
We'll have to do this more often, just like without recording.
Yeah, I know. It'd be awesome. I love it.
All right.
This has been Annie Grace with This Naked Mind podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more at thisnakedmind.com. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, as it really helps us spread the word.